were her rights violated by the admissions policy of the law school? How many would rule for the law school and say that it was just to consider race and ethnicity as a factor in admissions? How many would rule for Cheryl Hopwood and say her rights were violated? So here we have a pretty even split. All right, now I want to hear from a defender of Cheryl Hopwood. Yes?
You're basing something on that's an arbitrary factor. You know, Cheryl couldn't control the fact that she was white or not in a minority. And therefore, you know, it's not as if it was like a test score that she worked hard to try and show that she could, you know, put that out there, you know, that she had no control over her race.
Good. And what's your name?
Bree?
Okay, Bree, stay right there. Now let's find someone who has an answer for Bree. Yes.
There are discrepancies in the educational system, and majority of the time, I know this in New York City, the schools that minorities go to are not as well funded, are not as well supplied as white schools. And so there is going to be a discrepancy naturally between minorities and between whites if they go to better schools, and they will not do as well on exams because they haven't had as much help because of a worse school system. So
let me just interrupt you to tell me your name.
Anisha.
Anisha, you're pointing out that minority kids may have gone, in some cases, to schools that didn't give them the same educational opportunity as kids from affluent families.
Yes.
And so the test scores they got may actually not represent their true potential.
Because they didn't receive the same kind of help that they might have received had they gone to a school with better funding.
All right. Anisha has raised the point that colleges still should choose for the greatest academic scholarly promise, but in reading the test scores and grades, they should take into account the different meaning those tests and grades have in the light of educational disadvantage in the background. So that's one argument in defense of affirmative action, Anisha's argument, correcting for the effects of unequal preparation, educational disadvantage. Now, there are other arguments. Suppose, just to identify whether there is a competing principle here, suppose there are two candidates who did equally well on the tests and grades, both of whom went to first-rate schools. Two candidates. Among those candidates, would it be unfair for the college or university, for Harvard, to say, we still want diversity along racial and ethnic dimensions, even where we are not correcting for the effects on test scores of educational disadvantage? What about in that case, Bree?
If it's that one thing that puts, you know, someone over the edge, then I guess that would be, you know, justifiable. If everything else about the individual first, though, everything they consider about that person's, you know, talents and where they come from and who they are without these arbitrary factors is the same.
Without these arbitrary factors, you call it. But before you were suggesting, Bree, that race and ethnicity are arbitrary factors outside the control of the applicants.
True, I would agree with that.
And your general principle is that admissions shouldn't reward arbitrary factors over which people have no control.
Right.
All right. Who else would like to, thank you both. Who else would like to get into this? What do you say?
Well, first of all, I'm for affirmative action temporarily, but for two reasons. First of all, you have to look at the university's purpose. It is to educate their students. And I feel that different races, people coming from different races have different backgrounds and they contribute differently to the education. And second of all, when you say they have equal backgrounds, that's not true when you look at the broader picture and you look at slavery. And this is kind of a reparation. I think affirmative action is a temporary solution to alleviate history. and the wrongs done to